Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma Starr, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. This is a series I've been inspired and guided to do thanks to my energetic connection to Kata Judah. Kata Judah is the sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, our beautiful sacred feminine site. And what I'm here to do is to give a platform to our men, for men who have walked that journey into the heart, are walking the journey into the heart, to share their experiences, their tools, their practices, their insights, their wisdom with other men walking that path now, and of course with us women who are walking right there beside them. Today's guest is a man from America, and his name is Billy Sunday Mars. Now, Billy is an author and he's also a trainer, and he's a trainer who teaches us how to use our body to train our being, our muscles to train our mind, and stress to strengthen our spirit. So looking forward to chatting with Billy and finding out all about his journey into the heart. Enjoy. Hello, Billy Sunday Mars. Welcome to Heart Warriors.
Thank you for having me. Hello, Gemma. Thank you.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. And this is going to be a really good episode because I did forget in the intro to mention the title. But the title that Billy has chosen is How Higher Testosterone and Higher Consciousness Can Heal Our MANdemic and Deepen Intimacy. So that stuff we'll all get into towards, once we've explored and found out a bit more about Billy. So, Billy, who is this man sitting in front of us? How would you describe the inner man?
Someone who's been on a long journey through difficult beginnings. One of the reasons I do what I do is because of a lot of early family trauma. My dad died saving children in a fire when I was 4 years old, and my mom took on raising 4 kids on her own, and I watched the toll it took on her. I wasn't quite aware of how it happened as it went along, but she started to smoke, and she hadn't smoked before. I never noticed it anyways. And eventually she ended up with cancer. And they said she had maybe a few months to live, and she was able to survive for almost 3-4 years like that. And I watched how, even with that happening, she kept trying to take care of us. So I had this example of Wonder Woman, because I knew, I had seen on TV, everybody's seen cancer kills people, but I'm visualizing that my mom's going to go really quick. And so she kept going and going and going. And eventually it did, when I was 16 and a half, it did take her from us. And I remember just my older sister, my younger brother and sister were there, and thinking, okay, I already had to be the man of the house when I was a little kid. I had already started working, doing different jobs and warehouses and everything, because I was tall for a kid when I was younger. So I went off to work. But who I am is a lot because of not only witnessing who she was, how much the people in the neighborhood took care of one another, and through the difficulties, I learned that we can have difficulties in life, yet we can group together and try to understand and support one another through it, because other people in the neighborhood had the difficulties as well. But who I am is a result of learning early that people go through difficulties, and we don't know what anybody else is going through. But we do know that if we help each other out and support rather than judge and condemn one another, we have a better chance of making it that way and being able to grow through it.
Yeah, that's so beautiful, and yet such a fundamental value of, you know, the consciousness, the energy that we're moving into. So can we go back to the little boy who was, you know, standing up to be man of the house? How did he step into that role? And can you remember the emotional turmoil or the emotional uplifting, or what was happening emotionally at that point?
Well, I remember being, and I can go back to this being part of why I am how I am now. I remember uh, reading a lot, trying to kind of just shrink my world into, well, I'll just read and learn and learn to play sports, and I learned to take things apart, like the television and the telephone and anything I could find around the house, the stereo. Uh, I know I drove my mom crazy with that, and I know I drove my sister crazy. I know I drove everybody crazy. But I remember trying to that's how I learned to cope, was to not so much pay attention to what was going on inside me as to almost avoid that feeling of and what's really interesting is I always had this question in my mind of why did I understood my dad died saving kids in a fire, but it often felt like he died on us and didn't care about us but cared about them more. And the little kid felt, well, I must not be worth it if, you know, those other kids were worth more because he died saving them. But, you know, as it went on, it began to change. uh, I remember wanting to be around the conversations my mom had around the table with her friends, always trying to listen into what the grown-ups were saying and what was important to them. I remember uh, trying to understand. I think I drove my mom crazy with that wonderful four-letter word "why" all the time. Why is this? Why is that? Well, this happened. Well, why? Billy, but why, mom? Why did? And I would sit down and watch a television show with her, and we didn't have a remote control then, so it wasn't like we could pause it and she could answer me. I'd go, well, why is he doing that, mom? Why is he saying that? How come you did that? Oh my God, why did they shoot that man? But she was really kind about things, and afterwards she would explain. Uh, I think it was a lot easier because even if I was out of line, she was never somebody who reprimanded. She would more so ask why I did what I did and what I thought I was going to get from it. Like, what did you think was going to happen? And if I was, I had my younger brother who I was, well, my younger brother, my older sister, and I was very protective of anybody, you know, any one of them. I played baseball, so I had a bunch of baseball bats around. And when my sister brought a boyfriend around, I would stand at the door looking at him with a baseball bat, like,
Mm.
but she was 6 years older than me. And I remember my mother saying, Billy, just yeah, but I'm making sure this guy's okay, mom. It's like, Billy, she's bringing him in the house to introduce her to the family. Let's introduce him to the family. Just you stay here. I think I tried to cope by trying to be a male and trying to learn what an adult understood. Uh, but again, the kid brain wasn't quite getting it.
So how did, in retrospect now, what were the, can you see any gifts that were given to you from your parents both passing away?
Oh, definitely, definitely. One thing that's an important part of my story is my mother's older brother, who was a truck driver, came to live with us to help support the family. He stayed there with us for a few years and eventually moved, got his own apartment. But he came and moved in with us. And my mother's other brother was once a pro boxer. And when I was about, I'd say 11 or 12 years old, I remember I was sitting in the living room reading the Encyclopedia Britannica as always, and then he just walks in. He says, "Billy," and I said, "Oh God, there's the voice," because he had this voice that sounded like he ate glass. He says, get your gym clothes on. You're coming with me." And I said, "Why?" He says, "You got to be the man of the family. You got to protect my sister." And I said, uh, "Okay." I remember, just sitting there and him saying this, and I said, "What are we doing?" He says, "I'm teaching you to box." Oh, but I want to draw. I want to read and draw. I don't want to go box. I want to play baseball if I can do that. But no, come on. So he dragged me literally into the gym. I remember the YMCA, and he brought me in there and started teaching me to exercise. He taught me to box and learn how to defend myself. And I remember spending a lot of time around him. He brought me into the the house that he bought for my grandmother. We eventually moved into, and I remember him bringing me in and saying, "Okay, we're going to teach you to do chin-ups." And I'm looking around, going, "Chin-ups? How do you do those?" So he says, you get up there and pull yourself up, pull your chin over the top. It's called a chin-up. I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "Aren't those pipes hot?" And he looks at me and he says, "Are you going to let that stop you?" And I went, "Wow, well, okay. So what do I do?" And he says, "You see those rags? You take them and you put them in the sink, put them in the cold water. You get some cold water, and then you wrap them around the pipes and you get up there." So that was my attitude. Okay, I went up there and did that, and I think it was a few weeks later, he took me to see the movie Rocky. That was the first movie I actually ever saw in a movie theater. So I remember him talking about how important my mom was to him, and when she passed, I got to see it firsthand. But we were watching the movie, and I remember still, and I joke about it to this day because it still gets me. This parts I still feel well up in because of the. He asked me. He says, "So what is the movie about?" And I said, "Well, clearly boxing." And he says, "No." He says, "It's about how life knocks you down, but you have to keep getting back up. It's about this struggles and trials you'll have to go through." And it's just in the movie, it was just being carried out. And he says, uh, "You're you don't have a father." He says, "I can only be around as much as I can." And he says, "Leslie," which was my uncle Les, he says, "Leslie will be around, but he's working as a truck driver and he's not going to be around to see you during the day. So I need you to be a fighter and take care of my sister. Do whatever you can." And I remember he used to have a slush truck, and he'd take me around in the slush truck with him. And I remember how he would the kids who could pay, they would pay. But after the kids who could pay left, he'd look around to see the kids who couldn't pay, and he'd call them over and he'd give them a slush anyways. And he says, that this is how you do it. He says, this is how you treat people. And my other uncle who lived with us, we'd play sports in the backyard. In Boston, it's called backyard. And so uh, he used to come home from because right across the street was Jessel's Bar and Grill. So he would be there at 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning. And I remember as a little kid going in there wanting to be with the truck drivers. And I would take his Teamster's hat and put his Teamster's hat on. Well, clearly I can't have a beer, but I had to have something that looked like a beer. So the bartender would put apple juice in a cup, spray the whipped cream on the top, take the thing and scoop it off so it looked like a beer. So I would sit up there with the mustache, the beer mustache, with the Teamster, with the hat on, with the Teamster's pin, So even though I didn't have a father around, I had male figures that were kind. And when I grew up and I was big enough to be out in the backyard playing sports, that same uncle there was a liquor store across the street. And in that store, you could buy cases of Pepsi or Coca-Cola. And he would come with cases of Pepsi and Coca-Cola for all the kids that were playing sports. He just 2 cases. And he goes, I know you guys are thirsty. He would put it down and just go. So the examples I had as a man growing up. Now, this is a truck driver who still beat all of us in arm wrestling matches. We tried to beat him. He was like 60 something years old, and he's just taking us all down. And this other uncle who's a boxer, I'm watching these examples of men who, I mean, I don't know if and they were both military. My father was also military. So people who were that strong as men and that tough, truck driver and boxer, the two ends of the spectrum as far as tough, and yet they were really kind. So the example I had was, oh yeah, that's how you do it. I didn't know any other way. And so what I say now, I realize how fortunate I was to have males that provided that foundational example, and the other males in the neighborhood, the fathers that I had, there were sons that I'd played sports with, and they would take us fishing or they would do things with us, and they were similar. So that example of not having the physical father there, yet having males who provided an example, like it takes a village. So I had males that provided me the example of what you did. And I remember my mom, and I this is one of the other things I praise her for, was if I were going to the store, we lived in an apartment complex. If I was going to the store, I had to knock on the doors of the elderly people as I was going by and say, Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, do you need anything? I'm going to the store. And that was my experience. So I talk about, yeah, sure, I had attachment trauma from my dad dying. I had the trauma, but the parts of me that were supposed to learn how to take care of other people were there. So there were difficulties, yet the gift was, if I had just and had my dad there, I could have learned from him. Yes, I could have been around him. And a year later on, I heard he was wonderfully chivalrous with my mom. He took care of her. He was really just treated her like a queen. And I found that out, so I knew that as an example. But I also had the example, well, it's not just my dad, it's other people's fathers, it's my uncles that are like that. And that's what men are like. And we would all get out in Massachusetts winter and shovel the snow. We went out there with our shovels, and it wasn't that we had to wait. We'd look around and we'd see, okay, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, okay, we got to get these lots shoveled. They're not going to be able to get their cars out, and we just did it. As soon as the sun came up, we were out doing it. There were no questions. That's what you did.
Billy, this is amazing. And this is, what we often see in the older movies, and this community spirit and this beautiful, mentorship that you had from your uncles. Is your society where you live still like that? Is the generation younger than you still like that, or has it disintegrated?
I'm working on that. I ended up moving once to Florida and then out here near Berkeley in California. And I remember I still have the Boston still creeps up in me every once in a while, because when I first got out here, we were taught. I remember my mom would walk up to a door and she would look at the door and would not go through it till either I opened it or my brother opened it. We opened the door. We opened the door, and when women stood up, you put the coat on, took the coat off. You put the coat on when they stood up. I got that backwards. You push the chair in, you pull the chair out. All that. That was what we did. So when I came out here to California and I noticed all the guys walking on the inside, and sometimes the woman's carrying stuff, I thought I was like in an alternate bizarro world. I'm going, is this really happening? How is this happening? And I remember a friend of mine asked if I could. He had a pottery shop in uh, Fairfax, California, and I remember he said, "Can you watch my shop for me? I got to go to the DMV." So I said, "Oh, yeah, man, cool, I got it." So I'm in there watching a shop, and it's a shop that's directly to the outdoor, and it's raining. It's just, I guess it was during the storm season, the wet season, where it floods here. And I remember there was a car parked right in front, and a guy comes running up with the umbrella and goes to get in his side when his girl comes running up on her side to the door. And I lost it. I said, "Hey." And they both stopped and looked. I said, "What are you doing? You're going to let her get wet? You got the umbrella. You're going to let her get wet, and you're letting get her in and her get in her door by herself?" And I remember the finger. I said, "Get the door." And he goes, "Oh, okay, okay, man, okay." And he goes around and gets the door, and he says, "And you give her the umbrella." I said, "Now go ahead around the other side." And he goes around the other side. She dusts off shakes off the umbrella, closes it, and looks. She just, and I said, and I just walked out in the rain. I said, "Hey," I said, "I'm sorry to be abrupt. I know it was probably a shock to you." I says, "You have to cherish this woman who's here with you, and if you can't see that she could catch a cold, she's getting wet, she she's done her hair up and everything for you, and she's taking care of herself, and you're just going to let her get soaked while you go around the other side and let yourself in." I said, "You're a male. She shouldn't even have her fingerprints on that side of the door. From now on, you get the door for her. That's the first thing you do. You don't let her open any doors, and you make sure she's taken care of." And he said, "Okay, man, thanks." And it was, he wasn't a small guy. He was good enough size to have wanted to maybe say, "I'm going to fight back," but he didn't. I think he got it and said, "Okay." But it's tough to see that people don't help one another. It's tough to see, like in traffic out here, if you're driving, like if I'm driving and there's a bus there, and I'm driving and there's people here, I'm stopping so the bus doesn't block them in. I'm going to let the people go by. I'm going to stick my arm out the window and say, "Hey, go ahead," or beep and say, "Hey, go ahead." And the people in back, they can yell and scream, but that's what we were taught to do. You let people go by. You don't just, because if I was stuck behind the bus, I wouldn't, I'd be, "Oh, hell, there goes my day," or whatever. I'm, playful about it. But you just, we have to be more aware. That's what we have to do, is be aware of other people. How would I feel if I were stuck? How would I feel if my sister were stuck? How would I feel if my brother, who ended up pretty sick, was stuck? So
Billy, in your opinion, why has society disintegrated within a couple of generations?
I think a couple of things. I think both parents have had to be out of the home working to support families, and that takes away, yes, grade school, kindergarten, etc. they're able to go to school. We went to kindergarten, I remember that. But when you came home from school, at least by a certain time, parents were home or both parents were home, and you had dinner around the table. Uh, Old-fashioned family values, so to speak. You sit around the table and you talk about how each other's doing. You have dinner. Uh, we don't do that anymore. So no one knows what's going on in people's lives. We're isolated. And another thing about one of the reasons testosterone is important is because male testosterone is down from, I think it was something in a John Gray workshop. He said men years ago, 70-year-old men had more testosterone than 40-year-old men today. So that's the energy that it's an adaptation and challenge hormone to be able to stand up and do things that are difficult for people. And again, I'll talk later on about the negative side of it that can happen. But we as men, and we dropped the ball. I think now my father was a little taller than me. I'm 6'1", he was 6'2". My mom was 5'5". And I remember other people in the neighborhood, the fathers were pretty good size and the moms were, shorter and but really sweet women, really wonderful women. They were just great to be around. And I remember how the men acted towards them. And these were, I mean, the man downstairs that helped us after my dad died, Bill Stickney, he was a police officer. I'm going to go through some names. Mr. Conrad over the corner, Mr. Bill Brown is over there. These men acted as I was told my father acted towards my mother. They, there was none of this thought that if you treated a woman with respect, you were less of a man. The understanding was you as a male do all you can to make sure that that woman that's given her heart to you, and this is the way I interpret it now, she gave her heart to you. You make sure she has what she needs, because now what she cares about is the kids. She cares about the society around her. She cares about the home. She's got a million and one things going on that, because of how she is as a woman, she cares about. Us guys, we can care peripherally, but we're going to work. So the reason why we honor her is because she feels the whole system, and we are there to, and I talk about this a lot, we're there to provide and protect. But yet when it comes to it, we also have to be able to, what I say, communicate and connect. Because when my dad came home, I remember as a little kid, he would spend time with my mom first, and then he'd spend time with us. Because I think what happened was he was getting the lowdown on how we were. So and I could tell. I remember being a little kid. He was a big guy, so he would take us, my little brother and I, and pick us up and give us a kiss and tell us. I still remember that we would jump down the stairs. He would catch us, and I remember how he was with my oldest sister and everything. He would sit down and talk with her, and he would. I remember sitting with my mom and my sister, holding them both, and they would just lean in, and that was what my dad. Oh, that's how you do it. That's what a guy does. And men have lost the capacity to be tough enough to go to work and get stuff done so that the family's taken care of, so that the neighborhood's taken care of, and yet tender enough to understand, to connect, and understand what the woman needs, what makes her, fulfills her for her purpose, for what she's doing. Because she's looking at the neighborhood. She sees what's going on during the day while this guy's at work or doing whatever he's doing. And what if it's the other way around later on? What if she's gone to work? or if she has a job that she likes. Well, that doesn't take away from what he has to do. He's still got to be able to say, how was your day? Is there anything you need me to do around the house that you noticed? Because I know you're tired. And my dad could cook. From what I understood, my dad said, "Hey, Shirley's night off," and she would go sit and do what she had to do, and he cooked. So I learned to cook. But this is what we have 30 times the testosterone, anywhere from 20 to 30 times the testosterone for a reason. And that's to allow, I realize now, to allow women to be in their feminine. There were problems back then with a lot of things that were done. I realize the patriarchy now has its issues. It's gone off into a more fearful way of being that causes people to want more control. But what I saw, like I said about chivalry, and chivalry wasn't, oh, she's the damsel in distress. Chivalry was more to me, this wonderful being offered her heart to me. I got to do everything I can to make sure that she feels taken care of and seen. And it doesn't mean taken care of just monetarily, because a woman can make more than a guy. Wonderful. If she's doing what makes her happy, great. You support that, because he's doing what he can, and his job is to create the container. Because even if she's earning more, if there's a loud noise outside, he can't say, "You're the breadwinner, go get it." If there's a loud noise outside, buddy, you're up. That's it. There's no question about it. You get up, put on your slippers or whatever, and you go find out what that is. That's your job. And we don't do that anymore.
Oh, I love this conversation, Billy, and this subject of chivalry. We see it all in the news feed about, men sort of working out now what it means to be a man. But if men weren't blessed to have the examples of masculinity that you did have growing up, where can they go to start learning about what chivalry really is? Because it's one thing to see it in the movies and it's one thing to hear about it, but to actually understand the energetics of it. And it was really important what you said about it doesn't mean the women are damsels in distress. And I think that's where a lot of the women's lib did a lot of damage as well. It's like, well, women can do things for themselves. We can open our own car door and, all this stuff. So can you speak to this, one where men might be able to explore more about this, and also speak to women as it doesn't mean that we're weaklings and can't do it for ourselves. What is the gift of the masculine when he is chivalrous?
I remember a post, and thank you for asking that. Thank you for asking. Thank you for having me on here to be able to talk about this. Let me say this. I remember, I'll say this first to say the other part. I remember being in the hospital with my mother when she had operations, and the final few times that she was when she was going through her bout with the cancer. I remember watching this woman who had staples in her stomach, and she started working around the house, and we came home from school and her staples were bleeding and she's still doing stuff. So I remember how hard she tried, because there was no one there and we had to go to school. And so I remember her laying there, and I remember asking the doctor, I said, this cancer thing, how'd she get it? And he says, well, we don't know. She smoked. And I remember saying, because I asked why. My favorite show growing up was a show called Columbo here. So I said, well, why'd she smoke? What causes people to smoke? And while we're at it, what causes people to drink? Because I remember her, she had tab, but I remember also other bottles on the counter. And I don't remember her, I didn't see her doing that. And he says, I don't know. She had her reasons. Maybe, you know, she had her reasons. So that was part of my thing to figure out what causes women to, or what caused her to smoke to the point, or because cancer, she died of cancer in her abdomen. She had a tumor in her, near her uterus. And so it was uh, that area. So I'm saying, well, if she had cancer, why wouldn't it be in her lungs if she smoked? So I began to look at that. Now this is going back into chivalry, why it's important. I figured out later on that it was because of the stress she didn't have, especially being around John Gray and his workshops. She didn't have oxytocin. She was developing testosterone to compensate, but at that age, having to have that much testosterone, because she had us when she was older, uh, and that much stress on her system without a support system, that's what caused her problem. She didn't have somebody to love her. She didn't have someone to make love to. She didn't. She wouldn't find anyone else because my she said she couldn't find anybody like my dad. We asked, Mom, how come you don't date? Well, this is why. So I think it's important for men to realize that even if women do what they want to and can, that there's a certain amount of stress that causes a hormonal transition in the system that eventually causes the immune system to break down. Uh, if women have too much testosterone, it causes a breakdown. If men have too much estrogen, it causes a breakdown. Uh, so men not doing what they're supposed to do, there's a lot of prostate problems in the world, and they happen more often because testosterone drops. Meanwhile, if women are in their masculine, women are having more heart attacks now than they did before. And when we talk about heart attacks, we have to also talk about breast cancer. Now, there's a thing with breast cancer and estrogen, but on the heart itself is the thymus, which is a lot of where the T cells and a lot of the immune system is. So that area of the woman where she nurtures the world from her heart, she nurtures a child from breastfeeding, but she nurtures the heart from there. Those areas are having so many problems now. Well, why? Because that part isn't being supported of her. She doesn't feel her heart supported. The area where she nurtures the world and nurtures children, because I dated a woman a while back, and she says, well, I don't have any kids. And I said, a woman doesn't have to have kids to be a mother. Her very nature is that of taking care of the area, the society around her. And part of what I would do was say, uh, you take care of the garden, I'll help you take care of the garden. That's your baby, that's your child. You need work done in the garden? Let me know. I'll go to the hardware store or the store and get the dirt. I'll do whatever. But that's what makes you happy to do that. So I think men, because I've trained since I was 12 and learned how to create testosterone. You increase it and you release it into your system, how it actually works, the process. Uh, that allows me to be able to maintain that thought of, if something's difficult, I'm up. I got to do this. If there's something that happens, a lot of men because of emotional wounding that they may have had, their system physically isn't able to do it as much as often. And even if they are physically strong, their system hasn't developed the capacity to be aware, to connect, to be able to see that another person needs them to do it. There's a lot of men playing video games now. There's the whole porn thing. There's everything else. And that takes dopamine away from people. Now, dopamine, along with testosterone, is the challenge hormone. Dopamine is the drive neurohormone. It's not the reward like people think. It's more what allows us to move toward the reward. And if you don't have dopamine, you don't have a bridge to wanting to go do what needs to be done, what needs to be done to help out society. If I'm driving down the road and I see somebody pulled over on the side of the road, I mean, now sure they have AAA, but I'm still going to pull over and go, hey, you need to use the phone. Are you okay? Is it something? Because I was a mechanic. That was part of what I had to do growing up. I had no dad, so I learned to do auto mechanics. So I got tools in the back of my truck. Well, my SUV, I got tools. I got stuff to help out the. But that's what you do. We don't let. We don't. We're the first one to go do it. We don't say, oh, someone else will do it. No, it's got to be you. You've got to go do it.
This has opened up so much now, Billy. I think usually I do explore a man's deepest, darkest moment as an adult, but I know you've got a lot of knowledge and wisdom in the direction that we're heading. So unless you think there's a particular incident in your adulthood that we need to open up and explore, I'm happy to keep going in this direction. What do you think?
If I could, a short moment that would add to the story,
Please
would
do.
add to uh, another reason why I'm as I am. My younger brother, uh, my sister. When I went away to college, my sister had a boyfriend come live with her, and he was he was an okay guy. He had his problems. He was abusive. So I had to leave college. It's the reason I didn't finish college. I had to come back, and we literally got into a fight about him being how he was. The issue that was even bigger at the moment was my brother had my brother wanted to be bigger to play football, and I think he started trying steroids because it had just become popular, and his kidneys failed. So uh, it was back and forth, and I wasn't able, I didn't match to give him a kidney, so that was really it's tough to not be able to fight for him. I did all kinds of stuff. I wasn't able to save him there. It was a lesson that I learned that you can do all kinds of stuff, but you're not always going to be able to step up where you want to. But I remember as an adult, he I watched him because of his kidneys failing begin to drink, and he I watched him even after he got transplants drink through the kidney transplants. And again, that same thing came up. Why did my mother smoke? Why does my brother drink through two kidney transplants? And me, myself, and this is important for guys to know, and maybe women watching the show, from 15 to 30, I was bulimic. So there was trauma that had been through us as kids that had carried through. And I remember the difficult moment was I was in Florida uh, when my brother died. I wasn't able to get back in time. He had gotten into a bar fight, And the guy who did it had kicked him in the stomach, and it caused his kidney to fail. He was down, and I remember getting ready to either get on a plane, and if I couldn't get a flight out fast enough, I was going to drive back from Florida just to come find this guy. And I remember my sister Robin stopping me, going, "I know you're hurting about this, but you can't." Because I had been back from China and Japan. She said, "I see who you are when you came back. You were different when you came back. You can't go find this guy and do this." So I remember crying in my meditation space in Florida, because I loved my little brother. As much trouble as he caused me, I got into all kinds of fights for him, but I couldn't give him a kidney. I wasn't able to protect him then. I felt I had let him down. I felt I had let, you know, people down in my life for different reasons. But that, I remember that being my darkest moment, and being able to look and having to, I have the cross in my meditation space from my mom's funeral. And I remember the whole thing going through my head, and suddenly that thought came, "Forgive, for they know not what they do." So I had to forgive this guy. I had to stop myself from going up there, and I had to forgive this guy. And that last, uh, well, it wasn't the last death, but it was at that point in time the last death that I had felt in the family for quite a while. And just being back from China for those few years and doing work on myself, that was where the switch really happened. To know about addiction, to realize we had trauma, that what if this other guy went through the same thing my brother and I did, lost his father, and he was unable to manage himself. So that was where the switch happened, to go, "Oh, I have trauma. What if they had this stuff too? I wonder what else this guy does, because he's at a bar already. He's probably drunk. Why'd he get drunk?"
This is amazing, isn't it? And, to have that ability to look at someone else and recognize that despite the pain that you were going through yourself, that they also carry wounds. Now, you mentioned that you'd been overseas in China and Japan before this, working on yourself. So what inner work and what tools and practices had you been doing to get yourself to that level of being able to recognize the pain in someone else rather than just focusing on your own?
Uh, well, I've joked that I've had an interesting life. This is why, the whole thing with not judging people and everything else. Uh, I I was a dancer, and I had become an exotic dancer, and went overseas to Japan. My cousin Randy says, "Hey, let me get a job for you over here." And I said, "I'm not doing nude." He says, "No, no, no, we don't have to. We can go down, you know." And so I said, "What the heck? I'll try this out." So I was over in Japan, and I remember one of the things that really amazed me about what I saw over there. Downtown Tokyo, I saw a man standing there, and I made a post recently about being in our own difficulty, our own storm, and being able to be in other people's storm. And there was a monk standing in the middle of the street in the Tokyo, busy Tokyo, people walking by, and they're bumping into him, and it's pouring, and he's just standing there with the bowl in one hand and his other hand like this. And people took money out, people put money in. It didn't matter. And it's raining, it's downpouring. And I remember I was supposed to meet my cousin Randy. We're supposed to do uh, the show, and I remember just walking up, within proximity of the monk, and I remember having my umbrella, just putting it down by my side, looking at this guy, going, "Okay, I don't know if I'm capable of doing that." That's an amazing human being. And I mean, today we see Thich Nhat Hanh, who sadly recently passed, but uh, he wear his thing just like that. So when I'd see him with that, it reminded me of that. I wanted to learn what that man did, or what he did, because he wasn't all that old. He was probably my age at that time, but that just stopped me cold. I was a performer. I'm dancing and out there in Japan. They're whisking me around in cars, and it's cool, and all this stuff. And suddenly I'm stopped, going, "Okay, Bill, you're an idiot. That guy's got it way better than you." So that was one aspect. And then I was in China, and I was DJing over there, and I did a kick on stage as part of my dance routine. And one of the people said, "Oh, kung fu, kung fu. He can do kung fu." And I'm like, "Oh, great. They're going to put me in some fighting championship, and I'm going to get killed by some guy that puts his hand through walls. I'm going to die over here." And they said, "Oh, Billy, 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 will you come with us to meet the Sifu? You come with us to meet the monks. You come. Really, you can see." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, great." So they introduced me. They started introducing me to these sifus and monks and people doing martial arts. And they said, "Go ahead, do the kick." And I did the crescent kick like a dancer. And they said, "Oh, try this." And I had learned some martial arts as a kid, but nothing like what these guys could do. So they began to teach me stuff. And I remember saying, "Look, I saw another monk once able to stand out. How? How did?" And they said, "Where did you see that?" And I said, well, in Chinese, "Riben" means Japan. So they said, "Oh, okay, yes, they don't fight." And I said, "He didn't need to fight." And they said, "We can teach you too." So that was when they started teaching me meditation on one end, and training for martial arts. They said, "Oh, you have to go meet with these other people to do the inside training." So they taught me meditation. They taught me to sit with my discomfort, because I'm a guy from Boston. I'm a dancer. I don't want to sit. And they said, "No, you can't sit still. Your movement means nothing." And I went, "Oh, okay." So I had to learn to sit and meditate. And that's what saved my life. Because when I got back from overseas, I wasn't bulimic anymore. And I couldn't understand how or why I had no inclination to do that to myself anymore.
Amazing. And what you said about, never mind all the glitz and adoration and external validation that you had, with the career in Japan, it was that the monk who had the stillness was the one that had the wealth. Now, you said they taught you how to meditate and get that stillness when you were a dancer and you were very active and alert in your mind. Can you share those tools and practices to sit in stillness in meditation? What did they teach you?
Uh, uh, what's interesting is, even though I had trained in the gym most of my life, they taught me that the breathing was the most important, to watch the breathing. They said you can tell everything by a person, about a person, by their breathing, because they could literally look and see if somebody was going to fight with them, or how their movement was, by watching someone's breathing. And it was that subtle. They would watch, and that amazed me. So learning to be with the breath Notice the in-breath, notice the out-breath, and notice the whole aspect of it. Notice the beginning of it, the rising and fall, and they taught me to belly breathe and to watch the rise and fall of that. And notice it as if uh, ocean waves were coming up, rising and falling. And then they taught me that they said first the breath rises and falls and inhale and exhales. And they said, now watch your thoughts and watch your thoughts as they rise and watch your thought fall and disappear. And that allowed me to first sit with something, uh, because as soon as you try to sit and meditate, everything comes in. Where did I leave my keys? Oh my goodness, did I leave the iron on before I left the house? Is that this? Is this happening? And they teach you to acknowledge that that comes and it happens. You have thoughts of course, I had thoughts of my being how I was in my childhood, all these thoughts. But they said one of the great things I remember reading later on in a book called 365 Buddhism was they said all you are is a person in a movie theater. You can't do anything about what's happening on the screen. All you can do is watch what's happening on the screen. And so I began to uh, I read this later on and I said, wow, that's what they taught me to do. They taught me to watch what's happening within myself and within other people like it's happening on a screen. And it gives you the opportunity to, I remember the quote by um, uh, between stimulus and response, Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, there's a pause, and in that pause lies your power. Meditation allows you to experience the pause and extend the pause. If we can do that, so much trouble in our lives will be avoided. Because when they taught me to meditate, the thoughts, I would literally watch the thought come up of what I would normally say and do come up like it's on a screen. And I could sit and examine that screen and go, no, that's not a good idea. What else you got? Yeah, that's better. Say that, do that. And so to be able to say, what would be the most beneficial thing to say and do here that your old self wouldn't do? And that ability to be able to be with that. And this is why they, I remember them taking me to meet different people that were really well developed. And I said, how can you tell who that is? And they go, that's just it. You can't. They blend. You can't tell who the Sifu is. You can't tell a teacher. They don't act like a teacher. They're the normal chop wood, carry water person. They're not trying to be spiritual. They blend. But when something happens, they're there. And that was what they said was the breathing will help you be aware. Be aware of your breathing. Be aware of someone else's breathing. Be aware of how they're acting because you're not allowed to fight. They taught me all kinds of things to do. I learned 100 ways to be able to defend myself. But I remember the most important thing they said was, good, you already knew how to box. We've taught you things, so now you know better how to fight. But the most important thing is to learn how to not fight. And I'm going, well, what was all that other stuff? Why? And there's this monk who's half my size, and I joke he's half my size and twice my strength. They're throwing me around in the woods like a rag doll. I'm like, why did I get my butt kicked if I'm not supposed to do this? And they said, it's practice to learn how the outer defense has to now become the inner defense. You don't want to hit people. You don't want to hit back. There's a thing in Buddhism called don't shoot the second dart, which means even if you're uh, momentarily afflicted, don't don't let that cause you to then become the offender. There's a wonderful practice. I love Pema Chodron. She talks about Tonglen. You receive it. Here we talk about breathe in the good air, exhale the bad. They talk about breathe in the negativity and exhale the good. And that translated, oh, you have to exhale love, even if somebody shows hate to you. And that's why they're monks. They can fight, but they don't. They're still, above all, monks. And that was beautiful to me because I had grown up trying to be a tough guy, trying to be a dancer guy, trying to be all that stuff. And from the moment I saw that guy on the street in Japan, that was it. I realized, and we have in Boston, we're kind of a mix of a bunch of things. So I have a bunch of Italian friends, and my Italian friends would go, you got nothing on this guy. You got nothing. This guy, you got nothing on him. And that's what I felt like. I got nothing.
Oh, such a beautiful experience. I really want to go on and dissect the title that you chose for this and make sure that we do get it all in. Now, is there anything else that needs to be said about the teaching of the monks or your time in Japan and China that is relevant to this conversation?
They changed everything I did about working out, which goes back to the second part about using your body to train your being. That's what Shaolin is. When you resistance train, you don't, for instance, we do a bench press or a push up here. We don't push the resistance away like most guys get in the gym and they fight and they primal scream. What the monks taught me to do is hold the resistance. Like when I'm doing a push up, you hold the resistance. It's as if you're supporting another person's point of view. So instead of pushing it away, trying to get it away, because it's always especially with men, we're trying to get away from the pain. We're pushing the pain away or we're yanking it towards us rather than supporting the resistance to move closer. So basically, when I'm in the gym, I'm doing Qigong and Tai Chi with the resistance. I support it in different, I can maybe do a rep and a set, but it's not any of this anymore. Everything is be with the resistance. This is not something that's against you, it's resistance. It's actually helping to strengthen you. So everything changed. My whole workout routine 180'd from that. So that stressor now strengthens your muscles physically because your muscles are mediums for your mind. Your muscles, if, for instance, when your shoulders go up, your muscles are protecting you because in primitive times, a saber-toothed cat or a predator would try to grab you. That's the whole reason why we lift our neck up, our shoulders up like this, is to protect our neck. So when we're stressed from reading bad news, we think, oh, my shoulders are just going up. No, our system doesn't know that that's what it's doing. When we go into a fetal position, why we have so much back pain, it's because the psoas tightens up when we're in fear because it's trying to keep us in fetal position to protect us like this. And here we are on the computer all day long doing that. We're basically in the fetal position.
Wow, amazing. So, Billy, we've got about half an hour left. What needs to be said in this conversation around your title, because you also had to deepen intimacy in the title? Please, let's not make sure that anything gets left unsaid. Please take it away.
Intimacy. That goes back to, and I write a lot about neurophysiology because I wanted to know how I ended up an addict, how my brother drank through what he did, how my mom ended up smoking, how she ended up having the cancer from her system. Our nervous systems are designed There's a saying we're biopsychosocial beings. Our nervous systems are designed to connect. And that's just, I mean, even Einstein talks about it, that it's energy. Now, people say, oh, it's just that woo-woo stuff. And I say, well, you got Wi-Fi, right? I go, yeah. They'll go, yeah. And I go, you remember listening to the radio? Yeah. Were there wires connecting your car while you were riding down the street listening to the radio? So there's frequencies, there's vibrations. I have guitars, I play them. The only way a guitar plays is with a vibration. The only way a piano plays is with a vibration. The only way we speak is with a vibration. Our systems, 93% of communication is nonverbal. So only 7% is the words I'm saying. 55% is body language. 7% is vocal tone and prosody. So that whole thing is being picked up by the person we're communicating with before the words ever come out. So there's a saying, how we are speaks so loudly, no one can hear a word we're saying. If that's so, can you imagine in an intimate relationship? The heart has 5,000 times the electromagnetic field of the brain. It's 65% neuronal tissue. It's more brain than it is a muscle. So all of this is to pick up signals from a person we're attempting to be intimate with. We say we love somebody, but I often say we can't love who or what we don't understand. Do we really understand how that person's system is responding or reacting? Are we watching the body language? Are we watching the eyes? Especially with men, I often joke, a guy can walk in a room and say to his girlfriend or wife, hey, hon, how's it going? She'll go, fine. And he'll hear fine, but miss that she said, fine. So if he's unaware because those parts of his system, because of trauma, often in men, it's less developed. So men by nature aren't designed to pick that up. They have to develop that, which, by the way, happens through meditation and yoga. It develops the parts of the brain. Science has shown, I met the guy who put the electrodes on the Dalai Lama's monks' heads. So, and I had a conversation with him. I had to teach him to dance. He talked about neuroscience. It was a good exchange. I got the better of it. I admit. I had because I was trying to learn as much as I could. I took up more of his time. I admit. Uh, I have to talk to him again someday and make up for my end of it. But those parts of the brain heal. The parts of the brain that have trauma are actually healed by meditation. That's why when I got back, I was better. So I dove into it from that moment on and started buying every book. My gym was leaving Borders and Barnes and Nobles with bags of books. I didn't go out anymore. Imagine a guy who was a stripper just staying home reading books, which I did as a kid. But that's why this is so important for us to get. That's why we don't get one another. For men to be able to develop that aspect, to be able to understand how a woman sees the world, how her system feels the energy of the world, the room and the world and everything, and why she responds with everything feeling more urgent because her system sees it at a much more subtle level. The woman notices the match, the guy notices the fire. By the time it's a fire, it's a problem. Listen to the woman when she's talking about it's a match. She picks it up, her intuition picks it up at a more subtle level. We can develop that. A lot more men are developing that. That's good. But we have to, as men, realize that if we don't develop those aspects of ourselves, I often say all lashing out is reaching out. Men don't know how to be with their feelings, with their sadness. I stuffed mine down with food. Other men lash out with violence. All the stuff we see with men acting how they act, the internet stuff with people not getting along, there are areas of the brain that get hardwired to be more angry. Testosterone makes us more of who we are. So if a guy has high testosterone or gets more testosterone, it's going to exaggerate and amplify more of the anger. Whereas if he's quiet, it's going to exaggerate more of the stoicism. So testosterone itself isn't the problem. It's how that young brain started to form with trauma or PTSD if it's there. And it happens with women as well. If a woman has had a difficult experience, God forbid, a male assaults her sexually, which guys, if that's another thing, let's if we can pause for a minute. There's no time or space ever in life, in our world, that a male raises his voice or puts his hands on a woman, not angrily at all, for one, but without her consent. Period. There are too many women that have had these difficulties whose systems are also traumatized, who drink and smoke and do things to try to compensate, who have addictions like men do. The difference is men act violent, women typically stuff it down. This is where our MANdemic is. Because if it's great if a guy can learn to be better with himself through training, but we have to not ever let men get to the point where they're so sad that they're unable to address, because sadness, the anger is from sadness. The anger is because they're afraid to feel sad. So teaching men to meditate, teaching men to practice so they can heal those negative parts will also allow them to be more present to a woman for what her needs are in intimacy, to be able to listen, because the parts of their system that can hear her, that can pick up when he says, "Hey, hon, how you doing?" She says, "Fine." And he goes, that wasn't convincing. Well, what's going on? Is it something you'd like to talk about now, or feel you can talk about now, or like to talk about later? Because that doesn't sound like you. I want to let you know I'm here. I'm here to just listen. I'm here also if there's something you need me to do. Let me know if it's either or. Do you need me to do something? Do you need me to just sit and listen? Break in the schedule? I'm here. But he's got to be able to pick up on that. Intimacy on one end, and I may have mentioned I wrote the book Fit for Love. That teaches how to be more aware erotically while being aware intimately, along with the breathing, to notice what's happening. Because in both instances, intimacy and eroticism both have to, it's up to the male to be better at co-regulating. Because in order for a woman to feel deeper intimately, she has to feel that she is seen, understood, and heard at the slightest subtle levels. Otherwise, and this is why nothing can happen for her. They talk about nothing happening for women orgasmically, etc. It's because often not only is there a lack of understanding of her needs before being intimate, or to be into an erotic setting, but even while she's there, the man's not noticing if she's uncomfortable, how she's moving, if she's moving away, if something's not right, if she's not being touched right, or if she doesn't feel like she wants to be touched in the moment. And he's got to say, "Hon, it doesn't feel like this is good for you right now. Do you need to talk about something? Do you want to try this later? What needs to happen for you to feel better about this?" That's when co-regulation happens, and he can notice the subtle things when his system is working right. He can notice those subtleties. He can notice that 93% that's not being said with words.
This is fascinating. And, I'm sort of Well, I mean, obviously bringing my own experience into this, but also thinking, what men are thinking while you're saying this. And of course, it's just, a totally random guess. But I mean, us women think sometimes that men think we're too much work. To do all that is too much work for a man. And that's the feedback. Well, I know personally,
No, no, I'm saying I'm validating what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah. So
I'm
I'd
just
like you to talk to men, because there's an amazing payoff if a man is willing to explore this, which I mean, tell men, what is the payoff?
oh my goodness. Uh, I often joke about this, that if a man's paying attention, he doesn't see. In America, we have the 4th of July. His girlfriend, his wife, the woman in his life is the 4th of July all the time when she's happy. He doesn't have to wait to see fireworks. There's a great Sade song, every day is Christmas, every night is New Year's Eve. He doesn't have to wait till New Year's Eve. When he, again, testosterone is a challenge hormone. First of all, I'd like to say that men, you want a woman in your life that challenges you to be a better man. You don't want a woman that just yes, no, yes, yeses you. You want a woman that says, didn't you say you were going to do this? She can stay, because I mean, she may not be polite about it every once in a while, because she may get frustrated because it's the 15th time she asked you.
Mm.
Do it the first or second time. You may get a hold on, hun, the game's on. But after, pause, go do it. It's not that you're kowtowing. You're stepping into your masculine to be a better version of yourself. There's none of this, oh, you're whipped and all this stuff. I say to guys, look, if there's a point where she gets difficult and she says, just, and you have to say, hey, hon, you don't have to say it like that. Please, I'm open to listening. That's not cool. What's happening? Then I go back to what's happening that you feel you have to be like that, because that's not you. That's not cool. There's no need to raise the voice. There's no need to be and especially when a male is in a difficulty with a woman, the guy has to learn to step back because his energy is bigger. She can't feel threatened if a guy talks. If there's a difficulty, I always say, lean back. If you have something to say, if I'm up this going, that's bad. If I go, huh, what was that about? Why do you feel you had to do it that way or say it that way? Now my energies, she can accept what I'm saying without feeling threatened because I'm bigger. But you mentioned the payoff. When I wrote my book, uh, the company that published me had a book. It's similar. It's funny. It's a similar size, and the name of the book is "I Love the Female Orgasm." What does I often say to guys, do you people know what orgasms actually do? Because people think it's just a physiological momentary experience. It's not. There are healing hormones. It resets the nervous system. It resets the brain. It allows positive chemicals that are there for can be there for days. It increases DHEA up to 7 times, and this is what one other thing with guys that we have to realize too, up to 7 times pre-orgasm, so right on the verge of it. So in other words, if a guy understands he doesn't want to have her go right into it, nor does he want to do it himself. He wants to. The other thing about tantra, they say, with not ejaculating, the real reason is because at that point of what I call the pleasure plateau, you play at the plateau there, that is releasing hormones in their system that will literally keep us biologically younger. So if he says, oh, my girl's gaining weight, I go, well, what are you not doing for her? Because if she's not feeling something from you, she's eating to compensate. That's on you. Guys don't like to hear that often, but they go, oh, okay. If she's not having enough pleasure in her system, she's compensating with food. You're her guy. Why is she eating? Likewise, going into the other part of it, the beauty of that, there's a woman who's happy, seeing a woman, witnessing a woman happy, feeling that she's truly loved and seen and supported. There's a glow, an energy about her that he's not going to get anywhere else. And I mean, there's an ethereal aspect to it that when she's in that orgasmic state, there's a process called oming that they taught here in San Francisco. That's just one aspect of it. When a woman is in that space, there's an angelic place she enters. She literally leaves herself. And if a man's paying attention through foreplay or with her intimately, because he's paid attention to her, he's properly prepared her system to receive intimacy. I often talk about massage first because it allows her to go into a full parasympathetic to be able to receive. It's like preparing the soil before you put the seed in the ground. You nurture the soil, you make sure the sun, you make sure everything's right, the room's right. Same thing with a garden. You make sure that the temperature's right. You make sure the perfect timing is for you to be able to be received by her. And if that happens, post orgasm, she goes into an angelic state where she's literally out of herself. And it's the most beautiful thing. I don't know if many men have witnessed that, but to see it, it's an out of body experience for yourself. Most guys don't think it happens because they're not aware of what can happen for a woman. But her release, sometimes it's tears, sometimes it's full fury, sometimes it's years uh, of neglect, sometimes it's years of repression. But if he can be with her fully through and present and aware, the most beautiful things that can happen, like I talk about New Year's Eve, like the 4th of July, you don't have to wait. She's right there with you, walking beside you all the time.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Billy. So how do you suggest that men heal emotionally? You mentioned meditation, you touched on yoga. So, if you want to explore that, open that up a bit more. But what will you say to men out there that are just like, wow, is that even possible? What you were just talking about, or putting the blame on the woman, and I will say that women have a responsibility also to do their own inner healing and respect the man and come to a point. It's not just one-sided, but seeing this is about men. Please, Billy, talk to men. Where can they start to heal emotionally? How?
One of the things, thank you for asking that. Thank you for asking that. One of the things that was important to me, I think starting life in athletics, we were taught, okay, you have to self-scout. We have to be the ones that are willing to look at ourselves, admit where we're wrong, admit mistakes, because otherwise we're not going to get better. The deeper understanding of life is that from both the what we call the Buddha nature or the Christ consciousness is to enter into being that higher self. And when we become that self, we become the vessel for love. And as Rumi says, that the point is not to find love, it's to remove all the things that prevent it. So here's the thing. If there are things preventing us from loving someone else, those same things are preventing us from really loving ourselves. And the most narcissistic on the people on the planet don't get that they aren't loving themselves. I joke that good frosting can't hide a bad cake. Sooner or later, it's going to come down to that. So men, to be male, to be masculine, means that we have to be the one to say, even if somebody else is wrong, say, I'm apologizing for my part. And not only am I apologizing for my part, this is what I'm going to do to get better. Now, how can men get better so that they can even be prepared for that beforehand? there are so many spiritual books and wisdom teachings around. If you're Buddhist, there's wonderful Buddhist teachings. If you're into Taoism, there's Taoist teachings. I grew up Catholic Christian. Of course, I speak a lot about how the original Aramaic is much deeper. It's more centered in the breath and the breathing. It's almost Taoist. It's much more along those lines. So reading things that improve our wisdom, that's important. Allowing ourselves to be in situations where not only are we're vulnerable, but where we have to take care of something vulnerable. I I found a stray kitten in front of my house, and the apartment, I'm not allowed to have uh, cats, so outside. But I started taking care of this one kitten. Now there's 9 of them. I went from buying a bag of food to bags of food. But cats, I joke, all men should get kittens because, especially a feral kitten, because it's so sensitive to everything you do, and it won't come when you want it to. You have to create the space for that cat to come to you, to want to come to you. You can't chase the cat because the cat will run. You can't move towards it, it will run. You have to create the energy, the vibration, if you will, the frequency that that cat 93% picks up on, and then it comes to you. And if guys learn that, they'll get along much better with their girlfriends and wives because the feline and the female have similar intuitive, highly sensitive, highly aware, and cats are smarter than dogs. I don't care what anybody says. It's like, ready for this, guys? Women have better functioning brains. They have both sides of the brain connected. We don't have both sides of the brain yet. So unless you do work on yourself, she's smarter than you. I'm just putting it out there. The neuroscience bears it out. But if we admit that and do our work and stop trying to be macho and be better men showing up for our society and our world, and especially our relationship, our intimate partner, it will all bear out. All the gifts you ever want will come to you through her.
Billy, you've spoken a lot about increasing testosterone in men. How does a man do that?
By challenging themselves through my way that I've done it for a lot of my life is through exercise. You have to push the system beyond, and like the Dalai Lama says, know the rules so you can break them wisely, to push your system beyond what it could normally do, but wisely. You go to the edge, just like the DHEA we talked about a moment ago, and you move into that space where you feel difficulty. And I call it riding the burn. You ride on that edge of the burn. I have a thing on my one of my pages called Om Gym, and the Om stands for anger and anxiety, but also attention, urge, and mood management. Now, when we're in that place of difficulty, our mind says escape, but it is in that place. Rumi says the elixir is in the poison. In that space of difficulty is when testosterone and HGH is released. Well, it's increased in the system. Believe it or not, it's most released during orgasm. So that part of how we can grow younger and stay younger. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionist. However, things like tribulus help men do that. Fenugreek. There's all kinds of supplements on TV now, but they only help if you exercise and challenge your system. Of course, you end up in better shape. Your body releases body fat for fuel faster. And I'm in better shape now I'm 57 than when I was in my 20s and 30s, and it's much easier. And if my goofy self can do it, anybody can do it. This is all you have to do is understand and be with yourself and not judge yourself, not try to prove. You look to improve and allow yourself to be in that space without judgment or condemnation. Don't think you're weak. Don't think you're not good because you can't do it. And you work at your own pace. You do what you can in that moment. As it said, do your best, then rest.
Billy, I was going to wrap up, but there's something that you brought up that I wanted to clarify. So, in the conversation on raising testosterone, you did mention
Yeah.
orgasm. So, how does that? Because we've also had men that have advocated for semen retention, and I mean, obviously, I'm not a man,
Yeah.
so all the mechanics, but I'm putting it out there. Now, where does porn and daily masturbation come into all this conversation?
Okay. Like as with testosterone, and thank you for asking, as with testosterone, there's a myth that testosterone makes men aggressive. It makes you more of what you are. So there's a joke that Robert Sapolsky says if you gave a bunch of Buddhist monks testosterone, they'd run around challenging each other to do random acts of kindness. Imagine that. So, ladies, if your husband's already a nice guy, your boyfriend's a nice guy already, more testosterone will make him more of that. But as far as semen retention, we now know, for instance, what's released during that. Dopamine depletes, arginine depletes. Uh, if they're just releasing no DHEA, no testosterone, so they can greatly deplete their system so nothing is happening. So that's what unfortunately is happening with all this porn. And they're conditioning their system to want that same type of interaction, which is absolutely nothing like the real thing. It's nothing like what a real woman needs. And guys, when I wrote the book, guys would say, okay, Bill, you wrote a book, what's the best position? I go, what's her favorite? That's the best position. uh Porn, and mind you, I'll go back into it again. I'm a guy who was a stripper. I was a dancer. There is nothing more important than being able to resonate with the partner you're with. One woman, you go deep or you go home. Not only are you wasting your energy, you're wasting your drive energy to go out and do for you who you have to be in the world. You're losing your attention energy, which is what dopamine is. These things weaken us beyond what we could imagine. Whereas with your partner, you teach each other to co-regulate. So in that microcosmic orbit, you circulate the energy. DHEA rises. You retain arginine, which you can increase by having proteins and different things. Arginine is an amino acid. So tantrics don't realize that you can shorten the refractory period. You can increase that back into your system. There's supplements you can take. There's things you can do. Bananas increase tyrosine, have tyrosine, increase dopamine. There's ways you can increase that. They didn't know that back then. They did what they could back then. It was wonderful. The teachings of Tantra and Taoist teachings are great. They shouldn't be used predatorily like they are often, with men saying, "Hun, I can do this for you. No one else can do." Wrong reason. That's bad as well. But we can say that the connection is better. Your health is much better when you're with a live partner that you're loving and caring about, because you can improve your health, you can improve her health, you can improve connection, you can improve intimacy, you make life better in and out of the bedroom, and you'll be stronger and healthier longer, not to mention wiser, because it helps rewire your brain.
Wonderful. Thank you, Billy, for clarifying that. Now, is there anything that hasn't been said If yes, please say it. And if not, we'll move on to your final message for men. And also, I'd like you to show your book and let people know where they can find you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think the most important thing is that we learn, not only as men and women, but as men with men, to encourage other men to look deeper, to be better partners, to drop the machismo, to not reward other men for saying, hey, guess who I did or guess what I did. You don't want to shame them for it, but you do want to say, hey, man, that doesn't impress me. What else you got? And why would you do that? What about her? What do you think about her? You call men out on this. We have to call each other out, support each other, calling each other out, and supporting each other. Women, if you're in a relationship where a man is abusive or neglectful, uh, you're not telling on him, you are telling for him to get help, to find a men's group, to I mean, my page, I'm writing about it all the time, and I write from a place, I don't consider myself a guru. They'll never come to my page and feel that they're being talked down to. They'll never be shamed or blamed. There's no judgment. I want to create a space, as there are wonderful people. Satyen Raja, I just got off the talk with him. There's wonderful men doing all kinds of work, whoever they feel comfortable around. Uh, Men, be open to looking and listening to women teachers on intimacy and sexuality. Then if you have to come to us guys about it, because we're going to herd you back to the women, listen to her, because she's telling you what women need. She can tell you better than we can. You know, there's a saying, the mom is the first guru of the child in grown-up life. Women are telling you what they want. They're speaking from their heart. They're putting it out there. There's wonderful women teachers, Gemma, yourself, and that Jaya, she's on Facebook, and there's women that can. Francesca Gentile is wonderful. There's wonderful women. It's okay to be taught by women. I learn from women. They're the best teachers. This is what I want us guys to learn. Let's do this work. Let's create the world. The I call it being gardeners of the Eden all over again. Let's do this work together. Allow yourself to be vulnerable, because that's the only way. There's a saying, in order to be strong, you have to let yourself be weak. It's rule number one in the gym. The only way you succeed is by going to failure. Be okay with making mistakes. Be okay with failing. Be okay with, I call it turning your trash into treasure, your garbage into gifts. Be okay with acknowledging what's not good about you. Take that coal and turn it into a diamond.
Beautiful. So good. Thank you, Billy. So
Thank you.
show us your book, please, and
Yeah.
let people know where they can find you.
I don't know if you can see. There it is.
Fit for Love. Yep.
And it's a fun book. It's simply written. There's a lot of playful ways of looking at intimacy. It tells all about the nerves in our system, how our bodies work to have better intimacy, how to prepare it, how to create the neurochemicals. There's things with food. There's a lot of massage and where to massage so that the woman's system is able to receive better. And I did that because, like I said, it's women are wonderful. You all are just wonderful. You're gifts. I say you're God's gift, but we know that God is at least half, if not more. 95% of the universe is dark energy like yin. So it's more feminine than it is masculine. But the world's only going to get better if women envision the world and we engineer it. It's easy, guys. We just do that. I'm at BillySundayMars.com. I believe my information is there on the bottom. Uh, it's just a matter of talking. It's just allowing yourself and people to say, hey, this is the work I want to do. This is what I want to get into. And I'm as big a teacher on one end as I am a cheerleader for people as they're making progress. I don't believe in the old school beat people up to build them up. we use the body to train the being. We help you get in shape physically. I call it working in as you're working out, to help learn how to use your body. I do, if you're not in the immediate area, I do video calls and can train over FaceTime. And I love what I do. I genuinely love uh, I love seeing people realize things about themselves that they couldn't do before. I love watching couples get along. I love seeing people kind and good to one another. Uh, it's this is why we're here. This is why we're here. There's no pretense here. It's all out in front of you. This is my heart. It's out. I wear it on my sleeve. What you see is what you get.
I love this. And so one final question to wrap up, seeing you did bring awareness to it. Talk to men about the heart. What role does the heart have in all of this?
The biggest one. um, uh, the heart, especially learning to box when I was a kid growing up, the heart, because we wore head things, so fight, to do that. But again, my uncle who taught me to box. Now this is a guy who was ranked third in the world. He looked at me once and he says, "Okay, just like the monks," he says, "Tough guys don't do this. Tough guys don't stand. They go like this." And they say, "Bring it in." Not gonna, because he wouldn't fight outside the ring. So he talked about being able to open your heart, to be vulnerable, to bring someone in. Hugs, not drugs. Hugs heal. We need more of this. The hearts resonate. The heart, like I said, the biochemical and physiology of the heart. It's the most amazing, wonderful instrument that's ever been created. The brain, the parts of the brain that resonate, connect through the heart, through the vagus nerve, through that system. It feels. That's what feels. It feels before the brain can feel. And it literally runs on love. If it doesn't get enough love, if it isn't giving enough love, the thymus on it, we get sick. This part of our being as men, and having the heart to do what you need to do. There's the yin heart that's compassionate and caring and empathetic. But then there's the yang heart. And one of my favorite songs, a group I listened to growing up, Triumph. Fight the good fight every moment, every minute, every day. Fight the good fight every moment. It's your only way, and never surrender. That, being the boxer, doesn't mean just getting up off the floor or off the ground against somebody you're fighting against. It also, and more so, means getting up off the ground of something that you're willing to put yourself out there for. The term passion means that which you're willing to suffer for. It takes heart to grow. My heart is fully into growth because I know what it can do for people, to see people happy, to see people joyful, to see people not only that I care about, but a perfect stranger. To be able to say to somebody at the checkout counter, "Hey, how's their day going?" And they go, "Okay." No, and I go, "I ask because I'm asking. I'm not just looking for okay. What could make it better?" That heart, guys, be that person. You never know, you could prevent somebody from doing something hurtful to themselves. One of the mass shooters says somebody was kind to him, or somebody who was a potential mass shooter said, my guy that I spoke with a few years ago, Warren Farrell, said he was kind to somebody. The guy was about to become a mass shooter. He was all set. He had the rifle, he had everything, and he stopped. There's guys that would do that. There's guys that are going to commit suicide, maybe. Maybe it's a woman who's going to commit suicide, but be that kind heart. That heart is strength. That heart is beauty. That heart of love. You have to be doers of it. You have to be out there doing it. And I love the spiritual aspect of it. I can be completely calm and serene and do the whole Buddha thing, can do that. But once you're up off that, up off the Zafu you're on. Life is but a stage, and we're all in the cast. What mark of beauty, what story can you write? What can you do with your part in the world? Any little bit helps. A smile helps, and a gesture to help somebody pick up something, letting somebody in traffic. All that is practice to be a better person. We become what we practice most. Practice being a better person. You have your practice on the Zafu. You have your practice. Yoga is phenomenal. Yoga puts you in the difficulty. That's the purpose of yoga. If I can say this, yoga is not the postures. The postures are surrogates for what's happening on the inside. They can call it 1,000,001 names. All you're doing, if you're in a yoga class and your mind is in New York somewhere, there's no yoga happening. But if you're present to helping somebody and you're picking up an apple that you see somebody who can't reach it, and you're present to doing that, and you have to be present for that person and hold them up while they're able to do something, and your strength is being used, your breathing is being used, that's yoga. Yoga means yuj. It's the same as the word religion, religare, which means to reconnect. You are connecting with the source from your heart to that person. The source is coming through you. You're connecting. That is what people have to do. And then your woman will look at you and go, huh, maybe I will keep this guy. He's better than I thought he was.
So good. Oh, thank you, Billy. What a wealth of beautiful heart information and lots out there for men and women. So I want to thank you from my heart to yours.
Thank you. I thank you very much for having me and offering me this opportunity to speak with you. Thank you. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. And for those of you out there, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll be back in another couple of days with another episode of Heart Warriors.
Indeed, she will.